What happened? Someone set up us the bomb. We get signal. What? Main screen turn on. It's you.
How are you, gentlemen? All your base are belong to us. You are on the way to destruction.
What you say?
You have no chance to survive, mate, your time.
Alright, coming at you with another mid-gamer SSF video here. Just having some more fun, but let me know if anything is off. And diving straight into Uber Arbiter with this self-crafted mace from my last video. Completely deterministic, high fizz DPS weapon, which I'll show again later, but giving you a play-by-play before getting into the build craft and specs. And you can see here some of my mid-gear, as alluded to with the opening cinematic, quote-unquote. This one is all about base power scaling, that is, up to Uber Arbiter, no fancy items, jewels or gems, no herald chaining. Thought I'd be done after this build, but so many ideas to try out. Slow going as a mid-gamer SSF. Usually I'd move on by now, but it's that time of the league when streamers have shared their season conclusions and challenge vids are floating around, so I got this idea to beat Uber Arbiter with base power scaling, nothing fancy. And after like 12 attempts, I finally did it. So here just showing the rolling slam DPS, 67k plus 134k, that's 200k. So that's like notional DPS because of myriad factors like added attack time and buffs. I know it's a bit bait to put 2 mil DPS on the weapon in the title, but this is just a segue into the idea of power scaling in buildcraft, which I'll go into more detail later. So if each totem is 200k and I can stack up to 10 on a boss that's spawning, then that's 200 times 10 equals 2 mil DPS. And jumping into the fight, I was going to do a play-by-play, but that was getting too long. Maybe I'll go over the skills and rotation later. But first of all, disclaimers, look away if you're allergic to methodical gameplay or looking to min-max everything. At best, this is min-midded, no POE2 power reports, more like vibe tinkering, nothing meta, no tempo. Definitely don't ask about rarity or how long my snake is. But if you want to learn a thing or two and you're interested in buildcraft, stay a while and listen. If you watched the Mr. Llama SC interview with Chris Wilson around the 35-40 mark, this is one of those examples that falls under the category of functioning first and progressing slowly before going fast and then min-maxing. It's probably even pretty good for a league start, which maybe I'll test in the future, due to the deterministic mace craft. As a preamble, if you haven't watched my previous videos about this build, essentially I cobbled this together, this Oracle Ancestral Warrior Totem Hammer build for farming SSF Abyss and Ritual. Here's some T3 King of the Mist with the same mid-gear from the Uber Arbiter fight. Essentially combining Warcry Tech, which I saw from Dreamcore, and Endurance Charge Tech via Rage Consumption through Walking Calamity from someone else who I can't find now to credit. And then there was also Tadi's Spell Totem Vids plus some Rage Gen Tech from the Primal Hunger Keystone. But then I think this build is at least somewhat unique because I haven't seen any YouTube videos with this exact combination, and nobody on POE Ninja is playing Primal Hunger with Ancestral Warrior Totems on Oracle. Maybe because it's noob, because you're losing a lot of damage from the rage effect. The typical route with Ancestral Warrior Totems is to go with something like POE Guy. You essentially corrupt the Red Flare Conduit unique armor with the corruption mod and either path to the Resonance Keystone or use a fancy jewel to get there. And here's some T3 Xesht with my slightly better mapping gear. It starts off a bit slow, but after a while it gets a bit smoother and I can mostly keep up with the edge. The build is also pretty comfy to play and just works straight out of the box, nothing too complicated, since totems do all the aggro and resources are solved due to the Guts notable, which recovers life based on the endurance charges consumed. And I'll go over the defenses more in this video, but it's fairly tanky as is, spec'd into ES with a bit of easy armor. And the cherry on top is Mind Over Matter, because we don't use mana due to using AWT or Life Tap on the Totems. And this has definitely saved me quite a few times, for example, against a max difficulty Citadel boss. Going ES is the easy route to survive big hits, that is, compared to Armour, which I found in SSF to take much more investment. You need to spec into Armour versus Ellie on gear and the passive tree, but you can check out Karn, for example, if you want to go that route. I also haven't really addressed the recovery part of defenses, so you could definitely make it way tankier with some investment. Maybe you could do some kind of ES leech with Essential Sanguis or a Corrupted Soul Tether with Font of Blood on the Totems, or you could go full Mind Over Matter, maximizing mana, and do Font of Mana to get Mana Leech from the Totems. Or if you have more Spirit, you could add Mana Remnants to overcap your mana. And if you're going Armour, you can add Scavenge Plating or Bark Skin. I think that's the Spirit Gem. I wanted to touch on defenses, partly because I didn't last video, but also because before I set out on this specific combination for this build, I had died a lot. Like, my death count is around 200 now, whereas last league with my Invoker, which started Hollow Palm, through campaign, I had 0 deaths, and yeah, I was twinked, but still. And then I transitioned to Flicker Strike in endgame and mapping, and I got to Uber Arbiter, and by the end I had like only 50 deaths, and I was around level 97 too. So now with this build, I haven't died in maps for a while now, maybe only once or twice on a Citadel boss, and a few times on Arbiter, of course. So how did we get to this pseudo challenge run? Originally I wanted to beat Uber Arbiter with this self-crafted Mace. I'm just gonna let this shortened version of the video run. If you want the full explanation and video from the last video, go to the previous one. But I'm just gonna let it run, and you can see that I basically craft this in that previous video, and it's completely deterministic high fizz DPS weapon. So originally I wanted to beat Uber Arbiter with this Mace and completely basic specs, and by that I mean, in addition to no fancy gems or jewels or items, I thought I could only do it with like level 18 gems, no perfect jewelers or orbs, so only 4 socket skills, but clearly I'm no god gamer. I can barely survive 1 round of mechanics for Arbiter, though luckily in my successful run he decided to skip his mechanics. So after grinding 4 sets of Calamity Fragments, I almost quit. But then I got this idea and challenged myself to actually figure it out, and as they say, poverty is the father of innovation. So how could I bring Arbiter down with just base power scaling, only grindable stuff, no fancy items like the unique Corrupted Red Flare Conduit, no Headhunter, no Vertex, no fancy jewels, nothing like Heart of the Well or the From Nothing Diamond. Breach Catalyst and Delirium Emotions for Anoints are grindable, but still I had none of that here. No fancy gems or lineage supports like Rakyatas, Spateras, Sandalus. So basically nothing like that. Could I beat Arbiter? And here just showing all the swaps I made. I had recorded it before my successful Uber Arbiter run. This was like the 3rd set of fragments I grinded up. First time I grinded up 4 and failed with the completely basic specs. Tried again with a bit of changes, failed again. And this was the 3rd set of 4 fragments, and finally beat him on the 12th time. So definitely no god gamer. Schwingy I saw the Schwingy video recently. He did like Bone Cage, Smith Kadava, completely random build. He only beat him on like the 4th try. Never done it before, and I've actually beaten Arbiter before. So you can see here, swapping in that Mace that we just crafted. I actually swap in these gloves, my previous gloves, which I'd basically just dropped as is. They were pretty nice. Versus these gloves that I use for mapping, I crafted them and spent a bunch of currency and essences to get the crit damage bonus and effective socketed items, fracture orb, and fancy ruin there. And when I crafted this and swapped it in, it was like a 3.5% damage increase, so not even that big of an increase. But it's something. I guess everything adds up. Then I swapped in this one unset ring. It's not completely necessary, but you'll see later on I used it to add in a sunder, which I actually never used because I completely forgot to press the button. But one point for the rings for this kind of build, this is like a fizz build, fizz damage build. So actually I noticed that normally you would try to stack like whatever triple flat on the rings, but stacking the elemental stuff on these rings actually wasn't, it was like a 1 or 2% DPS increase. So it's actually easier to gear, like these other rings there just have a flat fizz on them, because we're not scaling elemental damage that much. Here, taking up my from nothing diamond to resonance, this I just dropped completely SSF, which was nice because I think it's pretty common or pretty popular as from nothing diamond, and just swapping in this one for the days on hit, which adds for a stun build-up, and swapping out my Heart of the Well, which had Cold and Chaos, I think. Yeah, Cold and Chaos, just for an attack damage one. And here I swapped in the Sunder gem. I thought this was going to improve the DPS as just like a one-button debuff. You can see here this Sundered Armor debuff is an additional 20% on enemies with fully broken armor, but I completely forgot to press the button, and so that does nothing. And swapping in Attrition, which I'm not sure how much that dealt. Overwhelming Presence was for the stun buildup. And here I'm just dropping stuff off. Skip that. So now I swap in the Rolling Slam. So for mapping, I run Sunder. And mapping, I just run all my regular stuff. But here I'm just showing you, drop in Heft instead of Branching Fissures. So here showing you can use Life Tap instead of Ada Louise. I swap in Concentrated Area for bossing instead of Rapid Attacks. Swap in Fire Pen instead of the Lineage Gem, Uric Smelting. Fire Pen again is good because it just bypasses Arbiter Resistances for Ignition. And just showing again the DPS was about 60 something plus what, around 130. So that's close to 200k as I showed before. Okay, and jumping in game, some other upgrades that I made in order to beat Uber Arbiter. Firstly, I allowed myself to make some upgrades from the basic, just level 18 gems, no PJOs, while still keeping within the quote-unquote rules of the challenge. Nothing fancy, only completely grindable stuff. So this is all my map. I'm on my mapping set now, but this is the skill gem Rolling Slam. I allowed upgrading to level 19 from level 18. I think that's still pretty grindable. Endgame, not even level 20. Those are actually fairly uncommon. I think I only have, I have 4 of them, but so I could upgrade if I wanted to, but I didn't for this challenge. And just FYI, nominally speaking, I kind of see each level as like a 10% DPS increase, and obviously different skills scale differently, but just nominally, each level is kind of a DPS increase of 10%. Then actually even allowed corrupting the gem, which I normally never do. I almost don't corrupt anything because I kind of only make one of each thing before I move on playing SSF. But I allowed corrupting because in this case you essentially you're socketing it into the warrior totem, so you don't even need PJOs for this. You don't need to increase the sockets because you only need one PJO perfect jeweler's orb for the totem, and this you don't even need the gem quality because this increased stun threshold is worthless. So you don't even need to use the gem cutters to increase quality, so that way it's much easier to corrupt the gem for that +1 level. And so with those two things, that's +2 levels, that's like a 20% DPS increase nominally. Next, I figured by the time you're attempting Uber Arbiter, you've probably dropped at least 1 or 2 perfect jeweler's orbs. So I did 5 socket this totem. So this allows another damage support, so I use Concentrated Area when embossing. For mapping, I still use Rapid Attacks 2, because it makes the Sunder a bit snappier. So I actually recorded, a kind of frame-by-frame analysis using the Rapid Attacks 2 gem, and the 25% increased attack speed resulted in about 18% faster in terms of frames for the animation. So I guess that's like essentially an 18% DPS increase. So I just went with Concentrated Area when doing bossing. And then also PJO'd the Forge Hammer, and I added this rather uncommon gem, Syzygy. So it's uncommon due to its quite conditional nature, since it requires the target to be ignited and fully armor broken. But this fits perfectly here because the Forge Hammer fissures have a base conversion of 100%. Fissures, base conversion, fizz to fire, 100%. So that's for the ignite. And just FYI, another SSF tip, the the fire damage is good because when you get to pinnacle content, they have high resistances, like 75%. But for whatever reason, fire type damage is the only type with a fire penetration of this fire penetration 2 gem, which basically ignores enemy resistances. So going back to the ignite, so although the sheet DPS of this fissure is like 7k max, which doesn't seem that high, remember that each slam, which procs the fissures, so each totem, so that's 3 shockwave totems and 10 ancestral warrior totems, that's like nominally 13 slams per second, so 13 times 7 is 91,000 fire DPS. And as for the armor break, well, that comes from the Ferocious Roar. Let's see here, Ferocious Roar. That's like a 4k armor break. So that empowers the Forge Hammer. So sheet-wise it says 4k, but remember this is per fissure proc, so 4 times 13 again is like 50-something, 52k armor break per second. I have no idea how much armor Arbiter has. Obviously you could look this up, I guess, but I just noticed that everything gets armor broken almost instantaneously. And now that the conditions of ignite and armor broken have been met, the other big reason to use Syzygy is this first line up here about crushing blows. So it says causes a heavy stun that are prime for stun. So essentially, prime for stun is for unique at 70% instead of having to wait the full 100%. So obviously that just makes sure that they get stunned a bit easier, in addition to the other stuff like daze and overwhelming presence. And Rolling Slam itself has a kind of increased stun buildup on its own. And then to top it off in terms of Syzygy, let's go back to Syzygy here. To top it off, you get this Intimidated debuff, which is 10% increased damage and 10% DR. So talking about the Syzygy and crushing blows and stun, this is one of those build-specific synergistic solutions. So after trying Uber Arbiter a few times, I can see that the first phase is fairly easy. He's just kind of standing around. But the second phase, he tends to jump around a lot, so my DPS would drop off because Rolling Slam is god-awful slow. So in this case, he kind of jumped back, unfortunately. So, but first phase, generally, he's kind of pretty stationary. So my theory was to figure out how to get him stunned so the totems could do the work. Inherently, Rolling Slam has more stun buildup. But that's the main DPS skill, so I prioritized damage supports instead of stun buildup. I tried to running Leap Slam, but it felt inconsistent, and then I swapped to that Sunder for the Sundered Armor debuff, which I totally forgot to use. And then also, then I have that the other jewel there for the daze buildup. So when they're dazed, it's 50% more stun buildup. And then also adding in this overwhelming presence. So that's 20 here, at least at this level, it's 24% reduced stun threshold. And surely there are more ways to optimize the stun buildup, in the tree or whatever, but this seemed to be enough for my successful Uber Arbiter run. The other spirit drums I swapped in are War Banner. Still equip that is War Banner. So this is 25% more attack damage and 25% increased attack speed. And then I think I had also swapped in the attrition spirit gem. This is up to 57%, but this is what I didn't feel as much. I guess it has to remain in your presence. Whereas War Banner, I could definitely feel the DPS increase once I drop it. And just FYI, this takes advantage of weapon swap. So this is set to weapon swap 2. And it builds glory each time you hit an enemy based on the enemy power. So this basically procs every time a Forge Hammer Fisher gets hit with a slam. So again, with 13 totems proccing, that's like you required requires 200 glory, and a unique is 20 glory. So that's 13 times 20. That's over 200 glory in a second, so almost instantaneous. And by the way, I'd say this makes more sense as an intended mechanic versus the potentially bugged Savage Fury interaction, where it would build up hits from a different weapon set. Okay, going back to the pre-recorded respec footage. So these are the passive tree swaps that I made. Basically dropping a bit of defense, so these ES nodes here. I put it into increasing the shock magnitude, so that was ailments, magnitude of ailments. Just re-speccing some of these nodes here to make it easier for the tree. Take off these armor nodes. These like 3 armor nodes, very easy to access. I didn't spec into any armor, it's like all ES gear. Except these 3 armor nodes basically adds like a base 40% armor, which is good for small hits at least. But again, not good for big hits, but it's 3 points for 40% armor. Dropping those ES nodes there. I just put those nodes in here for ignition, because Arbiter, the ignites are pretty hard. Adding 1 point here, that was for the recovering life based on endurance charges, and again some ailment magnitude here. So that increased the base shock from 20% up to, I think it was like 47%, which is a 27% more damage essentially. And adding some more crit just to throw those points somewhere. Maybe there's a better place to put it. But that's essentially it for the tree swaps. Pretty straightforward. Obviously you could do a lot more with swapping out the tree, but I didn't want to go crazy with the swapping. And you can see here my level 97, my stats, life 17. Normally when I'm mapping my ES is around 7k, and then I don't know, 800 to 1,000 mana, again for mind over matter. That is kind of like another 1,000 HP, only 100 spirit. My resistances were not even capped during mapping. So those are my stats as it is. And speaking a bit more about power scaling, when you're thinking about your power level, when I'm thinking about the power level, if I'm even kind of like 10% of what a high-end streamer can achieve, then that's heading in the right direction. So, for example, I heard Rax saying his mirror tier plants were like 500k sheet DPS. Or like Belton's Lightning Spear was like 2 million sheet DPS, and obviously this varies greatly depending on mechanics, like how fast are you hitting, how many vines do you have out, how many spears do you have out. But, you know, just to note, if you're starting out in maps, I tend to find T15 is doable when my main damage skill gets around 20k DPS. You know, though obviously the stat sheet is misleading based on myriad factors like skill mechanics. Then when it comes to bossing, interestingly, you know, Cyclone was just on 0 points Theorycast episode 18. And he said like 1 to 2 million DPS target as a target for a max difficulty juiced map boss. You know, that's essentially where we find this Oracle Ancestral Warrior Totem build, because you have 10 of them and they're whatever 200k DPS. That's 2 mil DPS, basically for 0 investment. And before I forget, since I forgot the last video, I'll just go through all the gems. So Ancestral Warrior Totem. This is level 19. I think that just adds to the seconds. You know, the levels only kind of increase the resistances, and quality increases duration. Duration is pretty high. What is this with the 21.8 seconds? So that allows, at least on the because for Oracle Ascendancy, you have a lot of duration nodes. You know, big skill effect, extra skill effect duration nodes here, and then the kind of some on the base. You could invest in some wherever, like here. This is a big one here, but you're gonna get more in the Oracle Ascendancy. And for Calamity, you know, for Walking Calamity, there's another big node here. So you get a lot of skill effect duration through the Ascendancy. First one is Urgent Totems, so that just helps with totem placement speed and a bit of attack speed for the totem. Totem placement speed and distance is kind of nice. Where's the distance? Range, sorry. So that just means you can kind of like do it at the edge of your screen, basically. So kind of when I'm mapping, if you're playing really comfortably, you can kind of throw it, dodge, you know. So it becomes a bit more smoother when you can just throw it out, and then that gives it time to proc, to start attacking, basically. And then you get either Rolling Slam or Sunder. Sorry. You either have Rolling Slam or Sunder. So for mapping, I toss in the Sunder with then Branching Fissures. I tried Comb's Madness, but the Branching Fissures is nice because it just increases the kind of range, so you can kind of hit stuff off screen, which is nice because they hit so slow. So if you throw them out, it gives them time to attack. And then you either have AWT or Life Tap, and again, that's in combination with this very important notable for this Guts. So this is recover 3% of max life for each endurance charge consumed. So you can get 3 plus 2 plus 2. So right now I only have 7, but you can have this one for 9. So you're consuming 3 endurance charges times 9. That's like 27% of your life per totem summon. And that's why when you have kind of either AWT or Life Tap, or you could do Blood Magic, but again, I don't do Blood Magic because I like to have the mana for Mind Over Matter for kind of extra EHP, because you know you're kind of using your life for casting all skills. And this basically recovers all of its, 27, depending on how much life you have, I guess, 27% of whatever will more or less cover, and then you can increase or decrease that and change that as much as possible, or as much as you want. So that will essentially cover the resource cost of the skill. So that's super nice. And there's also some other synergies in the tree. For example, this one up here, 53% increased life cost of skills. So that's when you have AWT, that's more damage basically. And then you also get 21% extra chaos damage. Super nice. Extra chaos damage. That's a decent amount of chaos damage. It's not like we're scaling it too much or anything. And then the last one is either rapid attacks or concentrated area, or if you have other gems, you could toss it in here too. That's essentially utility or damage. Okay, and then talking about Ferocious Roar, this is the Warcry Tech I saw from Dreamcore. You basically have Ferocious Roar, and you combine that with this notable here, Roaring Cries, so minimum 10 power. Raging Cry gives you 4 rage per 5 power. And then Enraged Warcry 2 allows you to spend that rage to bypass the cooldown, and then just converting to life tap, just converting mana to life, and efficiency, just less cost. So this basically allows you to roar constantly. And I don't have a lot of rage. I've only 60, so most other attack builds are maximizing the rage, but actually minimizing rage just decreases the amount of roars you need to get that up and running. So for me, it's 4. And other things in terms of war cries, trying to just spec a bit into Warcry speed. So kind of Warcry speed here, a bit of Warcry speed here. This one is nice because it also debilitates enemies, so that's just kind of slow potential for 1 second. A bit of Warcry here. Warcry speed, so that just makes it a bit faster. Oh, and then also this nice note here, Warcry inflicts 3 critical weakness, so because I'm constantly roaring, critical weakness is up basically 100% of the time on anything that lasts more than a second. Okay, and then talking about the Walking Calamity Rage Consumption Tech. So I saw that in somebody else's video. When you have, that's just utility. When you have Rage Forged, it spends 10 Rage. And at first, when I saw the video basically explains that basically each comet procs each comet, like not just once. It's like each little comet falling down spends 10 Rage if possible. So that's super nice because it's basically consuming all of the rage and thus producing the endurance charges. And then that in combination with this Primal Hunger, the downside is no rage effects, so no kind of more damage. If you do have rage, this is a lot of damage obviously, but this regenerates 1 rage per second per 4 rage spent recently. So this is almost, I don't know if it's too easy or not, the downside is pretty bad. But this basically means it's just constantly regenning, and that's just constantly, and then I can just pop that right away. It's just constantly regenning the the rage, so that's just a self-perpetuating machine there for producing the endurance charges through the rage consumption. Okay, and moving on to 4-timer. So 4-timer, you throw it down, and then you roar. Branching fissures kind of increases the area by extending the fissures at the end. Rage 3 is just to generate more rage when it procs, and more increased attack speed when you're not at max rage. Rapid attacks just to get it down faster. Syzygy I went over before, and fire penetration ignores fire resistance. Shockwave Totem is just to proc the 4-timer, urgent totems to get it down and they attack faster, rapid attacks. Overabundance for limit, and efficiency less cost. You could probably put prolonged duration, but again, with the skill effect duration from the tree, it's 22 seconds is pretty long. Thunderstorm, this is just for shocking, make sure it's at least level 18, so it affects all enemies above, there's no level limit. And that's based on how many skill levels you have on your gear and whatever. You had Shock Conditioning 2. I mean, this is definitely going to get, I'm sure this will get nerfed in the future. But this just guarantees shock. And Overcharge and Commiserate is to increase the magnitude and to, I don't know if this works or not, but to remove it from yourself. And I saw this Living Lightning 2 makes these little Living Lightning minions. I saw on somebody else's video that these actually contribute to the Pounce Predator's Mark, but I didn't really test this myself. But anyways, you have this Pounce, the Predator's Mark. This is just increased damage for each enemy within 6 meters of it, up to 45%. So yeah, with these Living Lightning guys, I don't know if they add anything to it, but then here I allowed this one Lineage Gem just for quality of life, so I didn't have to constantly resummon them. But you get, I can get up to, I've got 7 right now. Living Lightning guys, I don't know if Totems, do the Totems count for that enemy, you count. Who knows how much that damage is, but anyways, that's what it is. Holy Descent gives you the Consecrated Ground for life regen. And Encroaching Ground makes it grow, Persistent Ground makes it stay longer. and also suppressive ground, so that's less cooldown recovery rate for the enemies. And Mark of Siphoning just for leech. And then you also have some spirit gems here for mapping. I use charge regulation. This is just 18% more defenses, so 7k ES. That goes up to what, over 8,000 or something like that while mapping. This I had a bit of extra spirit, so I just socketed precision in because you know your Fisher, the Sunder actually hits pretty far and loses accuracy with distance, so that helps a bit. Not completely not necessary. And Blasphemy plus Temp Chains. I definitely subscribe to, you know, this is the notion that Crip has, where this is just your kind of main level of defense. It's a pretty major part of defense, at least. Because, you know, we're playing pretty slowly. We're not a zoom build, so this kind of slows everything down with us. And Ritualistic Curse for Area of Effect, and Magnified Area for Area of Effect. This is not investing into it too much, but still 34%, pretty noticeable while mapping. Just lets you kind of jump around, dodge, throw down your totems, they aggro. It's pretty comfy playstyle. Here's some T3 Simulacrum, just to show you how it plays a bit more and how comfy it is. And just a few final words. Before settling on this Oracle Ancestral Warrior Totem build, I had run campaign as Ice Wolf, which was okay, but a bit squishy and not super interesting. You know, as many others have said already, the build was on rails. Getting to endgame, it just kind of feels bad for SSF if you don't have good gear. You know, because there's all these videos coming out like, look at me one-shotting everything. Then I ran Rampage Bear with this Forge Hammer setup swap. But bossing wasn't great, so I was thinking about how to take advantage of the higher DPS Mace, and at first I tried generating endurance charges just from Ferocious Roar, but I could only get like 1 to 3 totems down before the boss spawns. And I realized that Primal Hunger Tech and how easy that made generating endurance charges, so I swapped to full totems. Because I could see the sheet DPS is pretty high to start, just due to the deterministic DPS Macecraft. So whenever you're thinking about scaling damage, you know, either the skill has to hit really fast, or it has to hit really hard, or you have to overlap AoE for the shotgun effect. So, you know, kind of S plus tier skills do all three. You know, like a lightning arrow plus lightning rod combo. You know, you scale in IS and drop multiple rods to hit really fast. You hit really hard by improving your gear and stuff, and gems and such. And you can overlap AoE with multiple rods, you know, versus something like grenades is more like hitting hard if you have a good crossbow, and overlapping AoE with a shotgun effect. And, you know, if you can stack ballistas, then that's also hitting fast. Whereas with totems, it's more about hitting hard with high DPS mace and hitting fast by stacking 10 totems. So anyways, hope that helps somebody. Happy hunting and peace out.